Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. The roar of the lawnmower and the edging machine, working at the same time, rudely disturbed my Saturday morning sleep. A groan from the other side of the bed showed that it wasn't just me who was annoyed. Darla sat up and swung her legs over the side of the bed. She sort of stretched and yawned at the same time. "I'm sorry, Brian. I completely forgot. The boys wanted to start work in the yard early so that everything would be ready for tonight." She shook her blonde hair as she headed to the bathroom. Her ass swayed provocatively under a thin cotton nightgown. 20 years later, she still looked good. Today was my birthday. It was a tradition to have a barbecue and invite the whole world. Well, it wasn't that bad. Just family, friends, and neighbors. It was a little too much for a birthday party. We had to borrow some grills and smokers to handle everything. Even when I thought it was my day, I always felt obligated to cook most of it. I didn't do it very well, but everything turned out as expected. The best part about it was that the cook always had a cold beer in his left hand. I had to keep my right hand free to cook meat. "Do you want to get a birthday present now, or do you want to wait until tonight? The shower is warm and ready." Darla was smiling, peeking out from behind the bathroom door. There was no nightgown, and she was playing coy. "See you tonight, little lady. I'm going to go down and help the boys right now. I'll take a shower later." Todd was 18, and in 2 months he was supposed to leave for the University of Texas. Terry was a year younger, and he already had a scholarship to Auburn. They were good sons, and I gave Darla credit for bringing them up right. Perhaps the only thing I gave them directly was a comfortable home and a good work ethic. I've always regretted that I wasn't a better, more involved father. For a couple of hours, we treated the yard and patio quite carefully and then lit up some grills. I wanted to cook the ribs for smoking first. Burgers, hot dogs, and steaks could be cooked as needed, but the ribs needed to be pampered. Todd started the smokehouse while Terry spread dry mashed potatoes all over the meat. Hell, the way things were going, I probably could have sat back and let them take care of everything this year. Darla arrived just as we were finishing all our preparatory work. Her 2 sisters were supposed to come to help her with everything she needed. More than 50 people needed to be fed today. It's funny that friends come when there's free food. I was 40 years old, but I still felt like I was 20. And next month, Darla and I will celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. It was a good marriage. Making love wasn't as hot as in previous years, but it was still great. It seemed to have stopped about a year ago, shortly after Darla started working. The fear of an empty nest pushed her out of the house. I was happy if she was happy. We didn't need the money, but she needed communication. The boys and I went to the shower. Especially for this occasion, I had a new shirt that my mom brought earlier in the week. It wasn't really my style, but I had to wear it. I looked like a Hawaiian pimp. Darla wisely insisted that I wear an apron. Of course, I had a beautiful apron with the inscription, "Don't kiss the cook." It wasn't long before our guests started arriving. Some brought dishes of food, some brought gifts, and some brought drinks. The weather was fine, and the day promised to be beautiful. Darla looked great and, as usual, was the perfect hostess. She would have turned 40 next year, but she could easily pass for 30. She kept her figure and appearance. I was looking forward to a few exotic weekends and vacations after the boys left. I watched her flit between the tables, making sure everything was perfect. The perfect wife and the perfect mother. What more could a man want? Finally, the excited crowd began to eat. Plates of food suddenly appeared and disappeared all over the yard. Most of the guests brought their own garden furniture, which simplified the task. The beer was in one trough, and the soda was in the other. I knew that the cake was safe in the kitchen, waiting for its hour of glory. I do not know where he came from, and I definitely did not recognize him. He was tall and wearing a dark blue jacket. He stopped at the edge of the party area, bent down and said something to one of the neighbors. She pointed at Darla. He thanked her and walked towards us. Darla noticed his approach and seemed to feel a little uncomfortable. I didn't say anything when he passed me. "Darla Connors." My wife nodded and said, "Yes." He handed her an envelope, which he took from the inside pocket of his jacket. "Darla Connors, you've been served. That's all." He turned and left as quietly as he had appeared. Of course, by this time, everyone at the party was watching what was happening. Darla stood motionless. There was no emotion on her face. She looked at me, turned slowly, and walked back into the house. I watched and said nothing. The usual chatter of the guests turned into muffled murmurs and whispers. In a desperate attempt to break the spell of the moment, I screamed, Does anyone want more ribs? Come and take them. Todd and Terry came up to me. What the hell is going on, Dad? Terry was trying to be restrained. All I could do was shrug my shoulders. Todd went into the house and I touched his arm. He stopped talking when I shook my head, indicating no. Why don't you guys check if we need any more beer or other drinks? When the conversations in the courtyard began to return to normal, I relaxed a little. After 10 minutes, I decided it was time to talk to my wife face to face. I didn't have that opportunity. Dad, Mom is leaving in a Mustang. Terry pointed to the front of the house. My black convertible Mustang was speeding down the street faster than it should have been. The backyard was quiet again as everyone watched her walk away. Darla usually drove a minivan, but it was parked inside. The Mustang was at hand. There were a lot of unanswered questions, but I think they'll have to wait until my wife gets home. After that, everything went downhill. Darla's sister, Peggy, brought out the cake, and I made a feeble attempt to look happy. Without Darla, everything seemed to be clouded over. Friends and neighbors left first. The families stayed a little longer, but in the end there was nothing left to clean or wash. Surprisingly, Darla's sudden departure did not become a topic of conversation. Everyone has made some effort to avoid any mention of it. I was alone with my 2 sons, and the house was quiet. They both looked at me, waiting for some sign or explanation. I had nothing to offer. I sat on the couch alone while they went to bed. I was still there in the morning. Todd and Terry got up early and started the day by returning the grills and other supplies to the neighbors. The smell of fresh coffee lifted me off the couch. Darla didn't come back. Whatever was in that envelope must have been very important. I called her cell phone several times, but it was turned off. Of course, I stayed up half the night trying to figure out what was going on. The boys finished putting everything back in place and left. It wasn't difficult for them to understand that I wanted to be alone. A long, hot shower helped, but not much. There wasn't much I could do on Sunday. Tomorrow I might find out if the police can help in any way. I didn't know any cops or detectives, but I had a few friends in the courthouse. I hope they can help. We had 1 credit card and 1 debit card. The debit card was used for everyday purchases, and the credit card was used for large purchases. We paid for both cards monthly. If Darla had problems, she would have to take advantage of them. Credit card purchases were credited to the bank account after a couple of days, but debits were usually made after a couple of hours. First, I checked the credit card activity and found nothing. The debit card was a different story. About 2 hours after Darla left the house, she bought gasoline at the Pennsylvania-Ohio border. 2 hours later, she received some in Illinois, and the last transaction was an ATM in Cedar Rapids, where she withdrew $300. I was finishing my 3rd cup of coffee when I realized she wasn't coming back. She wasn't just killing time, she was running away. I loved my wife and didn't want to do anything that would hurt her, but I also didn't want to encourage her in everything she did. Even though it was Sunday, I was able to cancel both cards in 10 minutes. About an hour later, I called the police department and reported that my Mustang had been stolen. I didn't tell them that my wife had taken it. I explained that there was a bank card in the car and that it had been used in 3 states heading west. I was embarrassed to lie to the police, but I thought it was the only way to get some attention. It was weak, but they seemed more interested in getting rid of me than asking about the circumstances. I did a quick inventory of the house, and the only things that seemed to be missing were her purse and a small travel bag. I had no idea what she had packed in it. For several hours, I argued with myself about what to do with her cell phone. Since I canceled the cards, I hoped that would make her call home and explain everything. I still didn't have time to have lunch. Before I knew it, it was time for dinner, and my sons brought a couple of pizzas. There was a lot of food left over from yesterday, but I have to admit that the hot slices were delicious. We finally found time to talk about what happened. I told them what I knew and they offered support. That night I slept in my bed. Darla never called. Todd and Terry worked in the summer at a local tree pruning company. It was hard work, but they seemed to be able to handle it, and they liked the macho image that went with the job. I waved at them from the porch as the Jeep moved down the street. After finishing my coffee, I returned to the empty house, still trying to figure out what was wrong. I called work and took a week off. I was already a little tired of this job, but they paid well for it. I was delivering gravel from one of the local quarries. It was hot and dirty, but there weren't many decisions to make. I just picked up the cargo, shipped it, and received my salary. Right after Darla started working at Prescott Casualty Company, we attended several company events. They had parties and picnics where I met some of the people she worked with. I just realized that for the last 6 months or so, we haven't attended any more meetings. In fact, she never even mentioned them. They were important to her when she first started working at the company, and then suddenly stopped. I don't remember the people I meet very well, but I remember Bob and Margie Gilson. Bob was a carpenter, and Margie worked in the same office as Darla. It seemed possible to call Prescott's company. Margie, this is Brian Connor. Do you have a minute to talk? Hi, Brian. I'm very busy right now. I hope it's not something important. Darla didn't come to work today, did she? No, we didn't really expect this from her. Oh, really? Why is that? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. It was obvious that Margie was uncomfortable talking to me. Brian, I don't think I want to discuss any of this with you. I think you should talk to your wife. I'd love to, but I have no idea where she is. There was another long pause. Brian, I'm sorry, but I have a lot of work to do. I have to go. Before I could say anything else, she hung up. Suddenly, I had the feeling that something was going on in connection with the Prescott cases that Darla didn't want me to know about. This explains why we no longer attended company events. She was afraid that someone would accidentally say or do something that might give her away, or make me believe that she was up to something bad. I took a cold beer and went out on the porch to think. I've noticed a few things over the past few months, but I haven't given them much thought. Darla started working overtime several times a week. Not enough to wave red flags, but it has become commonplace. She stopped talking about work when she was at home, and we began to avoid communicating with any of the company's employees. On the other hand, she hasn't changed her appearance or clothes. She didn't buy any new clothes or fancy underwear. As far as I remember, there were no suspicious phone calls or emails. I trusted my wife, so there was no reason to think twice about what she was doing. At home, she did not turn into a bitch and did not deny me a romantic relationship. It's time to make some more phone calls. Donald Curry was an old school friend of mine who worked at the courthouse. I didn't know what he was doing, but I knew he was involved with computers. I explained the problem to him and planned to meet him when he got home from work. Before I left the house, I called Ronwell Home Builders and found out that Bob Gilson was working on an apartment complex nearby. I planned to meet him right after lunch. I usually finish my Taco Bell burrito, but today I only ate half of it. I couldn't wait to talk to Bob. When I arrived, the builders were still on their lunch break. Bob smiled and walked over to the car. He seemed a lot friendlier than Margie. Brian, it's good to see you. I suppose you want to talk about Darla. Bob, I talked to Margie this morning and she refused to tell me what was going on. You have to tell me everything man to man without any nonsense. I liked Bob because he was just as blue-collar as I was, but I knew if he tried to lead me by the nose, I'd get mad. Brian, I usually don't pay attention to Margie when she starts gossiping about work, but that's all I know. Darla has been dating a married guy in the office for almost 6 months now. They tried to keep it a secret, but soon it became known to everyone. Margie stopped talking to Darla when she found out about it, as did many other girls. We missed you because of the company's business, but we decided that Darla specifically wouldn't let you in. That's all. I'm sorry that there's nothing more I can do for you. Do you know who this guy is? No, I didn't pay enough attention. I can figure it out for you. Don't worry about it, Bob. I'll deal with it. For me, this pretty much summed up the situation. There was no misunderstanding. It was just a stupid husband who had no idea what was going on in his own house. 10 minutes later, I turned off her cell phone. Now she couldn't call home. I was returning home when I got a call on my cell phone. Cedar Rapids police found a Mustang parked in the bus station parking lot. The car was towed to the impound lot and I could pick it up at any time, paying $300. I went to the police station and was given a printout of the protocol. The only conclusion I could draw was that Darla had left the car and taken the bus. I couldn't figure out where she went, but I assumed she was going west. I didn't even know if she knew anyone in the area. I went to the bank, closed all joint accounts, and opened new ones only in my name. I changed the recipient in my insurance policies to boys. I got to court early and drank too much before Donald arrived. Brian, there was a divorce hearing today, and Darla was called to testify. Of course, she didn't show up. Marcia Ridgway divorced her husband Kelsey, citing adultery. Mrs. Ridgway wanted Darla to testify that she was the woman with whom her husband committed adultery. So the divorce didn't take place without Darla's testimony? No, everything went as planned. It appears that Mrs. Ridgway had photographs, videos, and phone records that supported her claim. She didn't really need Darla's confession. I think she was served just to embarrass her. It seems to have worked. What is Darla's status now? The best I can say is that no one cares anymore. She can't tell you anything new and it doesn't matter. Kelsey Ridgway more or less confessed to everything after his wife's lawyer presented all the evidence. The judge immediately granted the divorce claim. The final decision will be made in 6 months. He is accused of embezzling child support. Did he have any children? 3, and all less than 10 years old. He will pay for this mistake for a long time to come. Donald and I talked for a while until he asked for permission to return home to his family. I thanked him for his help and asked the bartender to bring coffee. I was going to get one of the red pickled eggs from the jar on the bar, but then I remembered the leftovers from the party. I drank a little too much, but I still managed to get home without killing myself or anyone else. Under the circumstances, it was a stupid thing to do. I wrapped 6 ribs in foil and put them in the oven while I was taking a shower. By the time I returned to the kitchen, all that was left of them was a pile of bones. Todd and Terry returned home and immediately started eating pork. They tugged my leg a little, and then took the second portion out of the oven. Todd was thrilled with the Mustang situation. After 20 minutes of discussion, I finally agreed to let both boys take the bus to Cedar Rapids and drive the car home. I gave them $600 to cover the expenses. Terry wrote a note on the computer in which I gave them permission to take the car and drive it home. He seemed to know what he was doing, so I kept quiet and signed it. The next morning we all had breakfast and I took them to the bus station. I giggled a little as they boarded the bus. They had no idea what 2 days at the Greyhound would be like. It was a great life lesson. I called the Cedar Rapids Police Department to have them waiting. They promised that there would be no problems. There was something else I had to take care of. It didn't take me long to figure out where Kelsey Ridgway's office was. When Margie saw me, she immediately reached for her phone. It was too late. I didn't even bother to introduce myself. I just started hitting him on the head and shoulders. He made a few feeble attempts to defend himself, but ended up on the floor at his desk. I kicked him in the balls a few times before the guards dragged me back. He was covered in blood and I felt much better. After that, everything went quickly. Before I realized what had happened, I was already at the police station, appeared before the judge, and was on my way to the county jail. There was no trial, just the judge and me. I got 60 days, but I didn't give a damn. At the first opportunity, I called the guys and brought them up to date. I could have sworn I heard Terry laughing on the phone. The house could have stood empty for several days. Well, it wasn't exactly the way it was shown on TV. I mean, it wasn't a walk in the park, but I didn't feel like my life was on the line or that I could be raped at any moment. It was mostly a bunch of nasty farts who couldn't get along with others, and a bunch of stupid kids. Kids and farts didn't really communicate. There was no question of a separate camera. I ended up sharing a cell with a 300-pound gorilla named Jocko, who beat up his wife when he caught her in bed with his brother. I didn't know what happened to my brother. Jocko and I got along great. Of course, I took the top bunk. There were more carbs in the dining room than I liked, and Jocko was more than willing to help me with what I didn't want. Aside from the fact that he farted more than any other man in the state, he was the perfect roommate. 3 days later, Terry and Todd visited me. The car hauling trip went great, but they didn't want any bus trips in the near future. They had no information about Kelsey or their mother. They brought me 2 packs of cigarettes, even though I don't smoke. Todd said he thought they might be useful for trading. He's watched too many movies. Jocko, however, was overjoyed when I gave them to him. He said he needed to smoke to lose weight. I had no problem leaving the boys at home alone, and apparently no one else had. Todd left for school a week before I got out of prison. He took the minibus and left the Jeep with Terry. Terry and I celebrated my homecoming by going to Red Lobster. He was excited about the start of his senior year in high school. Unfortunately, he had to go through this without me. I had other plans. Margie couldn't believe her eyes when I walked past her desk the next morning. I winked at her and headed straight back to Kelsey's office. 3 hours later, I was back on the bus and on my way to the county jail, this time for 6 months. Terry thought it was funny, and he immediately called his brother at College Station. Jocko greeted me with open arms. Ugh, I handled Kelsey better this time. I really think I've broken something. Of course, I've never received any feedback, so I can't know for sure. I was fired from my job. A big surprise. I had enough money stashed away to pay for the house and cover my living expenses. Terry took care of everything without any problems. Besides Terry, all the other members of my family visited me regularly. Terry made sure that I always had cigarettes for Jocko. Darla's sisters came to visit me and expressed their sympathy. Neither they nor anyone else in the family had heard anything about Darla. In fact, the whole family celebrated Thanksgiving and Christmas in prison. I still had a month to go before I lost Jocko. I didn't actually lose it. It was just released before me. His wife and brother had gone to Florida, and he had no idea what he was going to do. Terry thought it would be great if Jocko stayed with him until he got settled. He offered him a job at a tree pruning company, but Jocko decided it was better for him to move south, where it was warmer. I was thinking about Florida. The night before Jocko left, Kelsey Ridgway was found beaten to a pulp in an alley downtown. He told the police that he was attacked by a monkey. I thought it was funny because I have an ironclad alibi. After my release, I decided that I had had enough of talking to Kelsey. In fact, he no longer worked in the area, and I didn't want to look for him. I signed up for a course to learn how to drive large trailers. It wasn't much more difficult than with the dump trucks I was used to. I had a few months to kill before Terry started studying at Auburn, so I spent that time fixing up the house. I wanted to sell it, but it was registered to both of us, and I didn't want any extra trouble. No one has heard a word about Darla since she left. Terry took the Mustang with him to Alabama because it attracted girls. I was never really into it, but I wasn't as young and handsome as he was. I found a couple who wanted to buy a house with clouds over their heads. I wasn't sure what that meant, but they made a good deal for the price. Their lawyer assured them that Darla's signature was not needed, and I wasn't going to argue with them. I just wanted to get rid of it all. Simple and clear. I used the down payment to buy a trailer. Before I knew it, I was on my way and free. I never bothered to file for divorce from Darla because I didn't see the need for it. I wasn't interested in getting married again. You don't meet many interesting women in prison, and Jocko directed me to an alternative. It turned out that Darla wasn't interested in divorcing me either because I hadn't received a surprise in the mail. I had no problems finding a job. I did not feel an urgent need for money, so I could be a little picky in my orders. I have never transported anything frozen, live, toxic, or explosive. I also avoided trips north of the Mason-Dixon line in winter. It didn't take me long to master all the intricacies of this craft, and I really enjoyed my new life. An interesting development occurred when I was delivering a shipment of agricultural equipment to South Dakota. It was June, so there were no problems with the weather. I unloaded the cargo and headed south about 10 kilometers from Highway 90 when I stopped at the Belly Up Diner. It was a hole in the hole, but the parking lot was full of big trailers and cars. The highlight was the breakfast, which lasted all day and was unsurpassed in size and taste. Most of the visitors were local, but it looked like a few truckers had stopped by on purpose. I just asked the waitress to bring my favorite dish and coffee. 3 large-screen TVs were showing 3 different programs that no one was actually watching. The TV closest to me was showing mostly political ads, and one of them caught my attention. John Hemingway ran for the U.S. House of Representatives. He was good-looking and seemed to have a sharp tongue. Standing to one side of him, dressed as Jackie Kennedy with a big smile on her face, was his new wife Darla. My Darla. My thoughts were interrupted when the largest plate of food I have ever seen was placed in front of me. Here you go, big boy. Is there anything else you need? Tabasco. The hot sauce was hidden behind the pepper shaker. Betsy, my waitress, giggled softly as she shifted it from its hiding place to my plate. Well, is that it now? Almost. Who is this woman standing next to this slick politician? She snorted slightly. This is Hemingway's new hand candy. He needed a wife so he could run for president. There were rumors that he wasn't straight, if you know what I mean. I started pouring Tabasco on the mound of food. She looks too old to be a candy. I think you can't be too picky when you're in a hurry. Nevertheless, she is pretty, and I think older women make the best mistresses. Do you agree? She really looked good. Her blonde hair was now brown and looked like it had been styled in a trendy beauty salon. Her makeup was flawless, and her dress fit her like a glove. It wasn't really a dress, more like a tailored suit. I looked up from the TV and noticed that my waitress had returned to work. The food was great, and it was easy to see why the parking lot was crowded. My coffee cup was filled twice before I cleared everything off my plate. The pie looked delicious, but I didn't have any room left. Betsy took my empty plate and put the check in front of me. Will he win the election? Not if we can help it. He has a lot of money behind him from influential people in Sioux Falls. None of the locals want anything to do with him, but we don't have the votes or the money to stop him. I giggled as I took out my money clip. You know something, don't you? Are you sure they got married? Yes. They actually showed it on TV like it was a reality show or something. No honeymoon, though. They said they would wait until he took office. I was still smiling when I put the 10 on the table. Mister, you better tell me this before you walk out the door. I'm not looking for trouble and I'm not sticking my nose where it shouldn't be. However, I would like to ask you a favor. What is it? Can I get a couple of hours sleep before I hit the highway? No problem, but beware of these cocaine whores. They sneak up here from time to time. They're dirty, nasty bitches. I nodded my thanks and, still smiling, walked out the door. Betsy watched from the window as I climbed into the car. I was just starting to enjoy a well-deserved nap when there was a knock on the door. I didn't pay attention to it for a few moments, but it didn't stop. Go away. I was told that I could park for a couple of hours. Whoever it was didn't leave, so I had to open the door. Betsy said I needed to talk to you. Do you have a few minutes? It was dark and it was raining. All I could make out was a stern-looking woman in a poncho. I didn't break any laws. Leave me alone. Just give me 10 minutes. She looked determined. Excuse me, lady. I'm not interested in that. Go get someone else. I'm not a girl of easy virtue, damn it. I need to talk to you about Hemingway. I'll meet you inside in 10 minutes. That seemed to calm her down. There was a slight smile on her face as she closed the door. It might have been better to just let her get in the car, even though she was soaked through. As I put on my raincoat, I glanced at my watch. I only managed to sleep for 3 hours. The restaurant was still quite crowded. There was a place next to the door where all the rain clothes were stored. In a couple of months, all this will turn into winter clothes and boots. She was sitting in a booth by the window with 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She had straight, shiny black hair with a small white streak on the side. Judging by her complexion, she was a girl who preferred outdoor activities, tanned and not pampered. In fact, she wasn't even close to being called a girl. She was at least 35, maybe more than 40. The whole look was complemented by high cheekbones and a lack of makeup. I held out my hand to her as I sat down. Brian Connors. Sally Wilmont. Do you want something to eat? No thanks, I just ate a specialty meal 3 hours ago. I don't think I'll be able to eat for a while. She replied with a polite smile. Betsy said you might know something about Darla Hemingway. I wanted to talk to you before you leave. What the hell is so important about Darla Hemingway? My brother Franklin is running against him in the election. Oh, I see. This is a personal matter for everyone. Not really. Franklin represents the interests of local residents, farmers, ranchers, and Native Americans. Hemingway takes care of the businessmen from Sioux Falls. We are not against business, but it seems to us that many people will not be thrilled if Hemingway is elected. Okay, but I still don't understand what his wife has to do with all this. We don't know either. All we know is that something is wrong. Our election commission tried to check her biography, but in the end it did not receive anything. His campaign staff did not disclose any information about her. Maybe it's all nonsense, but we're already desperate, and Betsy said she thinks you might know something. I think it's better for me not to become a professional poker player if the waitress can figure me out so easily. She leaned back in her chair. Aha. She was right. You really know something. Are you going to tell me, or am I going to have to beat it out of you? I finished my coffee and smiled. I found her words funny. Actually, it was really funny. I waved the empty cup at Betsy and leaned forward. I think I like the second option better. I have no idea what made me say that. It was not in my nature to be clever or use innuendos. I guess it was because I liked her behavior. She was confident and straightforward. I got the impression that she always knew what she wanted and knew how to achieve it. Betsy finished pouring, and Sally Wilmot was staring at me intently. I'm sorry. It was rude and impolite of me to say that. I will answer any questions you may have. Sally covered her mouth with her hand and laughed softly. It's all right, Mr. Connors. I'm not that impressionable, and your answer seemed sweet to me. I shouldn't have asked the question that way. Oh, good. This means that the second option is still valid. No, damn it. How do you know Darla Hemingway? She's my wife. We have been married for over 20 years and have never divorced. I haven't seen her in a few years, but unless she's divorced somewhere I'm not aware of, we're still married. Sally seemed at a loss for words. She didn't say anything at all. She just sat there and looked at me. What was her maiden name when she got married? She hesitated for a few seconds before speaking. Oh my God, her maiden name was Connors. The bitch didn't even try to hide it. Hooray. Of course, Betsy ran up to me, and all the heads in the room turned in our direction. I was a little embarrassed by the attention, but Sally seemed pleased. Sally jumped up and kissed Betsy right on the lips. She crossed the foyer and took out her cell phone. Betsy blushed slightly and leaned towards me. "What the hell did you tell her?" I haven't seen her this excited in 5 years. That sly ass that had been hiding in me for many years began to show up. I looked at Betsy and said, "I told her that you are my love and that I'm going to get married." She immediately realized that this was a joke and hit me on the arm as a reward. "Are you going to tell me?" "No, let Sally tell you. I'm going to go back to my car and see if I can get back to work. It was nice to meet you, Betsy." The rain stopped, but I never made it to the trailer. Sally grabbed my arm when I was halfway there. "You can't leave yet. You need to talk to Franklin. It won't take long, just a few minutes." "I would really like to stop all this. Now I'm sorry for what I said to you. How long will it take him to get here?" "He will meet us at my house. Do you want to come with me or will you follow me in your truck?" "I'll follow you." I felt better when I didn't have to depend on someone else's transport. The Jeep van that Sally was driving was at least 10 years old and probably more. After driving 3 kilometers through the rubble, we found ourselves on a worn gravel road leading to a similarly worn house. Someone was there because the place was well lit. There was no lawn, only gravel, and even that wasn't very big. I tried to stay away from the dirt, but it was difficult. There were no other cars nearby, so I assumed Franklin was still on his way. There was a storage area for outerwear and boots just outside the door. It seemed like a good idea, especially because there were already a lot of outerwear and boots. It was an interesting layout, mainly because it looked more like a classroom than a living room. There were desks instead of bedside tables. There were computers instead of desk lamps, and 3 teenagers were looking right at me. "Hi guys, this is Brian. He's here to help Uncle Franklin." Sally went into the kitchen and started making coffee. I nodded slightly to my listeners instead of saying hello. I felt a little awkward in these circumstances. I looked around the room but saw nothing to indicate the presence of Mr. Wilmont. Since I had 2 sons, it was easy for me to determine that the boys were about the same age. I assumed they were 16, 17, and 18. There was no TV or music in the room. All 3 seemed to be either working on a computer or reading a book. The strange thing was that they didn't look smart or boring, but seemed like normal, strong, and active children. "Brian, these are my sons. The eldest is Tracy, the next is Tyler, and the youngest is Tanner." Each of them smiled and nodded at me in turn. I couldn't help but smile, and my amusement became obvious. "I get it. It's a little weird that we gave them names that all started with the letter T." No, it's not something that amuses me. It's just that I have 2 sons named Todd and Terry. I thought it was a damn good coincidence. Tyler was the first of the boys to speak. "Where are your sons?" For this question, his mother gave him a stern look, which he seemed to ignore. "Todd goes to the University of Texas and Terry goes to Auburn." This simple statement lit up the whole room. Suddenly, Tracy came alive, as if he had been stunned by an Energizer rabbit. "I'm leaving for College Station in August. How long had he been there? What is he studying?" Sally finally touched his shoulder. "Slow down, boy, slow down. I'm sure Mr. Connors will have time to answer all your questions." As it turned out, Tracy had a full football scholarship, and he had already enrolled in college. Tyler was accepted into the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis and graduated a year later. Sally's husband served in the National Guard and died in the Persian Gulf 5 years ago. She didn't go into details, and I didn't insist. Tanner, the youngest of the boys, had not yet decided what he wanted to do, but his mother still made sure that he studied textbooks regularly. I had no idea what had delayed Franklin, but for the next hour I was busy talking to Sally's sons about everything in the world. Sally just stood on the sidelines and watched me communicate with them, just like I communicated with my own. After spending time with Sally's children, I realized how much I miss my boys. Finally, Franklin Honeycutt arrived with 2 assistants. After the performance, Sally got the boys back to work while the adults gathered at the kitchen table. Apparently, they had some doubts about me claiming to be Darla's husband, and it wasn't important enough for me to get into an argument about it. Getting up to leave, I thanked Sally for the coffee and told the boys it was nice to meet them. Sally didn't want to be a part of it. "Damn it, Brian, sit down." The others at the table sat in silence. Sally took over the conversation as if she were the one running for president. "Brian, do you have a marriage certificate or something like that confirming that you are married to Darla Hemingway? It only took me a few seconds to get the wedding photo out of my wallet. She was older now and had different hair, but you could still recognize her as Darla. I looked at one of Franklin's assistants, who was sitting with a laptop in front of him. Go to the archives of Berks County, Pennsylvania. You should be able to log into the marriage registration system from 1960 to 1990. Just enter my name in the search engine, Brian William Connors. Sally brought me a cup of fresh coffee and smiled slightly. She seemed glad that I hadn't left. Assistant number 1 turned the laptop screen to Franklin. August 17th, 1979, right? Franklin seemed a little more cheerful. I nodded and took a sip of fresh beer. Good luck in finding any divorce certificates. As far as I know, or anyone else knows, I'm still married. Feel free to investigate this case as much as you like. It doesn't matter to me. The conversation started to get a little redundant and boring. This time, no one stopped me when I got up. Do you mind if I stop in your driveway for a few minutes before I leave? No, not at all. Sally walked me to the door. I looked back to say goodbye to Franklin and his friends, but they were deeply absorbed in what politicians were doing. Each of the boys gave me a little wave or a nod as I left. An hour later, I heard Franklin and his band leaving. I thought I was finally ready for bed when I heard the knock on the door again. Sally jumped into the cab in her flannel nightgown. She put her finger to her lips, indicating that she didn't want me to talk. We were far enough away from home that the boys couldn't hear anything, but I think she just didn't want to talk. She spent at least an hour with me in the sleeping car. It was passionate and loving, but a little uncomfortable. The sleeping places on the trailer are comfortable for sleeping, but nothing more. I did everything I could under the circumstances. She left as quietly as she had come. Not a word was spoken. The sun had already risen when the knocking began again. It was Tanner, inviting me to come inside for breakfast. Fortunately, boys and men liked the same food, and Sally knew how to cook it. I spent another hour chatting with the guys and felt quite comfortable. So much so that he asked Sally for permission to take a warm shower before leaving. An hour later, I was finally on my way, but not for long. The local sheriff stopped me before I got on the highway. It looks like Mr. Honeycutt needed to talk to me a little more. I followed the police car back to the belly where Franklin was waiting for me. He was having breakfast and invited me to join him. Betsy brought me coffee and took the opportunity to wink at me. She and Sally must have been closer friends than I thought. It seems Franklin's legal advisors wanted me to stay. I used the old banal phrase, "time is money," to dissuade him, but he just laughed and continued to eat. It would be very easy to agree to everything and then just run away, but I decided that I might want to stay for a few more days, especially after last night. The politician paid for a motel room and meals, but it was the best he could do. It was a good opportunity for me to wash my clothes and also pay my bank bills. The Wi-Fi is excellent. I sent the guys a couple of emails and paid all the bills. I was just taking the second serving out of the dryer when Sally came in. I don't think I've ever seen a woman who looked better in jeans. She had 3 children, and she still had a perfect figure. Her blue Oxford shirt was not tucked in, but belted with a silver belt. Her skin glistened, but not from sweat, but from a natural glow. She was a damn attractive woman. "What the hell are you doing, Brian?" I shrugged my shoulders innocently. "I'm folding the laundry." "You were supposed to be gone. Do you remember when you said you were leaving this morning?" "Everything has changed. Your brother asked me to stay for a few more days. The only reason I came to see you last night was because I thought you wouldn't be here today. I can't see you here after..." She stammered, searching for words. She didn't seem to expect any kind of relationship other than a one-night stand and had no idea how to handle it. I was amused by her disappointment, and I decided that this was an excuse to have some fun. After talking to Franklin this morning, I'm seriously thinking about buying a house and staying here forever. It sounded pretty convincing coming from him. Now I know bullshit by the smell. What's really going on? I sat Sally down on a bench next to the dryers. "Your brother insisted that I stay for a few more days, just until they get something ready to hook up with Hemingway. I promised to stay away from you and the boys until he's done. I didn't want to embarrass you or do anything that would make you feel uncomfortable. That's not the problem, Brian. The boys like you. They wanted to know when you could come back. They were a little upset when I told them you were leaving. Tyler wanted me to talk to you about staying here a little longer. I'm sorry. I was just trying to be friendly. They reminded me of my family, and it was easy for me to talk to them. I didn't want to cause you any trouble." Of course, I didn't make things any easier when I approached your truck last night. You've definitely complicated things. For this hint, I got a poke in the shoulder and a smile. Why did you come to see me? Sally shrugged and looked a little embarrassed. I'm not sure. It's been 5 years since my husband died. 5 years without any consolation or passion. It just seemed like a great opportunity, especially considering you were supposed to leave today. She started getting annoyed at me again. Why the hell didn't you leave? I took a stack of folded laundry, gave it to her, and then took the rest before returning to my motel room. She hesitated in the doorway for a moment until I put my finger to my mouth, as she had done last night. Her shy smile was followed by a wide grin as she closed the door behind her. It's much easier to make love to a woman in a normal bed. However, I liked the shower the most. Even if the hot water ran out, it didn't stop us. Before she left, she made me promise to be at her house for dinner at 6 o'clock. How could I refuse? I was ready. Damn it, I've already showered twice today. Sally's dinners became a regular occurrence, and Betsy became my best ally. Betsy and Sally have been friends since childhood. Betsy was very happy to tell me about what they did when they were little, and about the boys they led by the nose. The conversations about Sally's husband were sad and far from frivolous, but they gave me a good idea of who Sally was and why I wanted to get to know her better. It was never my intention to stay in South Dakota, but the longer I was here, the more I wanted to stay. By the end of the first week, all the boys had Texas A and M t-shirts and Auburn sports jerseys. Sally kept one of the Auburn t-shirts for herself. It was too big for Tanner anyway. I didn't pay much attention to the political squabbles. Franklin and his team seemed to be doing just fine without me. Anyway, the press found out about Darla's dark past and started hyping it up. Hemingway's people tried unsuccessfully to ignore it. The more they denied it or ignored it, the worse it got. His popularity began to plummet. I never interfered in any business until one day early in the morning, someone unexpectedly came to my motel. The woman standing at my door was tall, blonde, and straight as a pole. I was still in my underwear, but I invited her in anyway. She avoided my gaze as I pulled on my jeans, but I followed her every move. She was wearing a dark suit with a white shirt and black low-heeled shoes. She was definitely a professional in her field. I wanted to take a leak and have a cup of coffee, but instead I forced myself to sit down at the small table that comes standard in every American motel room. My name is Mary Beth Steinmetz. I'm a lawyer with Levitz Brothers in Sioux Falls. I assume you're Brian William Connors. She knew my middle name. It wasn't good. Excuse me for a moment. I got up and went into the bathroom. Although I closed the door, I was sure that the noise I made when the water got into the toilet was noticed. I was going to wait a bit, but I felt that this pompous bitch needed a little humiliation. In less than a minute, I returned to the table. Was it necessary? No, but I could tell from your tone that we're going to be here for a while. I'm sorry, but I was just trying to be professional. You missed. What the hell do you want? Our company represents the interests of John Hemingway. We recently learned that your marriage to Darla Connors was never properly dissolved, and we hope to fix this problem. How? There are laws in the state that allow for quick dissolution of marriages under certain circumstances. We believe that we can take advantage of these laws with your assistance. Are you telling me to divorce my wife? Yes. Why would I do that? My guest seemed puzzled. I don't think she expected such an answer. At the moment, I would be happy to get a divorce, but on my terms, and I didn't want her to know about it. Miss Steinmetz just sat there and looked at me. Miss Steinmetz, could you please tell me in simple terms why my wife and I no longer live together? Don't embellish it and be completely honest. If you can do that, I'll think about continuing our conversation. She leaned back and undid the top button of her blouse. 3 years ago, your wife had an affair with a colleague. When you found out about it, she ran away because she couldn't face you and her sons anymore. She hasn't spoken to any of you since. Is that clear enough to you? That's good. In fact, you've hit the nail on the head. So what's the problem? If you're following the news, you know Darla and Mr. Hemingway are in a bit of a mess. We cannot fix what has been done, but we hope to make the situation a little easier. By getting her a quick divorce? That's right. And tell me again, what do I get out of this? Freedom. Damn it, I'm happy with the way things are right now. You're going to have to show me how my life can get better, not the way it used to be. What do you want, Mr. Connors? Do you need money? How much? Give me something to work with. What terms of divorce do you propose? There are none. That's why it can be done so quickly. Money does not change hands, property is not subject to division, and there are no problems with custody. You both walk away with what you have, and neither of you owes the other anything. Everything is clean and final. How long will it take? Less than 90 days. Does this mean that the decision will be made before the elections? Yes, I think it is. She admitted it, but she didn't want to play along. Should I see my wife? No, in fact, we'd rather you didn't. Do I have to stay here until this is over? This question caused my guest to sigh. Yes. Good. I will agree to this on one condition. You have to pay for my room and board until everything is completed. Mary Beth Steinmetz suddenly had a smile on her face. I could tell it was better than she expected. I could probably spin it for a few more money, but for now, just getting free would be nice. I can prepare the documents and send them to you for signature this afternoon. You don't mind? Great. I need to consult with my lawyer, but I don't think there will be any problems. I didn't have a lawyer, but I wanted to consult with Franklin first. Your lawyer? Give me your card. I promise to call you if he doesn't like something. If you don't get a call, bring me the documents. I was glad it was over because I needed to have breakfast. I walked her to the door, barefoot, in jeans and shirtless. As she was driving away, I saw Sally on the other side of the parking lot. Before I could wave to her, she sped off down the road. After a quick shave, I got dressed and headed to the belly. Betsy gave me a stern look as she handed me the coffee. Do I have a chance to explain everything? Not to me, Mr. Connors. You better come up with a good story for Sally. Breakfast was hot, but the company was cold. I finished it as fast as I could and called Franklin. He was out of town, but we talked for about 20 minutes. He was delighted with the whole situation and advised me to continue in the same spirit, but make sure that I have copies of all the documents. He spoke as if he was in control of the situation, no matter how it developed. I asked him to call Sally on my behalf. He was still laughing when he hung up. There was a large electric car wash next to the 90 freeway. I spent at least an hour steaming and vacuuming the car and then manually waxing it. It took another hour. It would have been easier to just pay and do everything, but I needed therapy. I had a bite to eat at Cracker Barrel before returning. I managed to avoid Betsy's anger. This time she parked right outside my room door. Sally got out of the Jeep when I pulled up and looked a little embarrassed. It was easy to tell from her expression that Franklin had called her. She spent the next 2 hours apologizing to me. Sometimes feeling guilty is helpful. When she left, Miss Steinmetz returned with papers to sign. For some reason, she also made me accept a check for $10,000. Hemingway's election campaign continued to go to pieces, but my divorce application went through the legal system. Tracy now lived in College Station, and he had a girlfriend who looked after him. I officially got divorced just before the election. Franklin won and promised to repay me for my help. I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong, but I told him that I would give it up even if he gave me his sister. For that, Sally hit me on the arm again. Darla wasn't doing very well. After the election, someone decided to accuse her of bigamy anyway. Before they could do anything, she just disappeared. She was good at it. I never got to see her or talk to her. I sold the truck and bought a house with a small gravel pit near Huron. Sally and I got married on Christmas Day, and all my 5 sons were there. Betsy moved to Doublewide and promised to take good care of him. The ultrasound showed that we are going to have a girl. Does anyone know the names of good girls that start with the letter T?